We're recording.
Hi,
Hi. For
how are
for
you?
everybody who doesn't understand why we're talking this way, I broke the podcast for like 5 minutes.
I watched him go into a full panic attack.
I was messing with the themes for our backgrounds and I changed it and it took me 5 minutes to figure out how to change it back.
It's
So
fun to watch.
yeah, I'm glad I could entertain Mahmoud this morning with my slight panic attack. Um anyways, we're here. We're recording. First podcast since before the open. Well, first episode of the podcast since before the open. We did podcast during the open, but not this
He's
kind of a
he's doing it
podcast.
again. He's going into another panic attack.
I'm just gonna drink coffee. Mahmoud can talk.
Oh man. Well, speaking of which, how was your open?
I racked up my worst open finish in a decade, so that was cool.
That's,
Basically, not quite a
that's
decade, but almost a decade. Um, I would say for myself, the open was very much what I expected it to be. And it did what the open probably should do for most of us, which was, in my particular case, remind me that I probably should do a little bit more pure conditioning in my training because fast burpees are not my jam, especially when I don't do them, being a little bit taller. And, the rowing workout, everybody was like, turned out to not really be a rowing workout, but um, I still wasn't in shape enough to hold a rowing pace that I would have been able to hold in prior years. So for me, it was a little bit of a reminder like, hey, maybe you don't always do skilly stuff when you do have time to work out, and maybe you do some burpees.
yeah.
So, what about yourself?
Same. I think I was more reminded of it than usual. I wouldn't say this is not my worst open, but I would say it's like my worst performance in since like 2016. Um, I still made it around the same roughly percentile. So like I ended up 90th percentile in Africa, 88th overall. That being said, my number was
Lower.
how lower, well, was way
Yeah.
lower. So I found out that I rely on skills
Same.
to excel at workouts.
Which you could say, we've obviously discussed this at length between ourselves, between the coaches, between the athletes. This open was very different from the opens we've seen in the previous years, but I completely understand CrossFit HQ's justification, not only because they want to make the open more inclusive, that's fine. If you look at the pyramid, it's nutrition, metabolic conditioning.
Mhm.
Then I think it's gymnastics. Then I think it's weightlifting. Then I think it's sport, if I'm not mistaken. Gymnastics and weightlifting might be flipped. But either way, them skewing the first part of the season dramatically towards the base of the pyramid, you know what I
It's
mean?
not it's not wrong. It's just unprecedented.
Right. It's not what everybody's used to. And that's what, ends up irritating a lot of people. And I mean, this was, by no stretch of the imagine my favorite open ever. Um, I also think there's a
No.
big separation in mindset from the people who have been doing this since 2013, 2014, 2015 in what we are used to thinking the open should be. And I think you just have to let that go. Like that's not what the open is anymore. I don't think that's what the open will ever be again. And it just is what it is.
Yeah. Again, like you said, it was a good reminder like, hey, you need to get your simple fitness up.
Yeah, burpees, rowing, high volume dumbbell snatch, relatively high volume dumbbell snatch. It really wasn't that many dumbbell snatches. It was just fast, like high intensity.
Yeah.
Um, That being said, I think 24.3 was my favorite open workout of all time in terms of
Um,
programming.
I think it was very smart. I can't get behind that it's my favorite workout. I just it's not, but
I think it's a consequence of like when it was like the year it's been programmed, what we've had in the last couple years of the open. The rep scheme was just so perfect to bait people into that meat grinder of the back 5 rounds. The
yeah,
1 minute, the amount of people who actually think 1 minute of rest matters in a workout like that was honestly comical.
right.
Like I mean, the number of conversations you and I had to have with higher level quarterfinals athletes all the way down to regular affiliate members about this minute of rest is a joke. Like
Right.
you can't actually think of it like a minute of rest. And that's the
It's
funny
almost a
thing.
trap. Like you can't let your
It is a
guard down.
trap. Well, and the funny thing about it is I made the example to a couple athletes. If I programmed that workout 10 rounds for time, like 5 rounds into 5 rounds,
It would be better.
you could, no, not necessarily better, but I guarantee when we went back and looked at the video, we could find a minute of time that you wasted on your own.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't think of it like it's an actual minute of rest.
But if you don't program the rest, I think people would have to pace from the beginning versus, oh, let me go finish this
You
and
wouldn't
then
you wouldn't get the bait
right,
that he got for people. We had plenty of members, normal affiliate members, fit people, but I'm gonna go 10 and 10. I'm gonna go 10 and 10 unbroken. And
right.
it's just like, dude, I'm telling you, that's a bad idea.
Like my job as a judge towards a lot of people were like, slow down, like stop, like break it up, slow down.
Yeah. And the other part of it that I liked a lot from a programming perspective was it didn't matter how fit you were, you couldn't escape what was coming.
Hmm.
It didn't
It
matter. The
it
elite,
it did also like it gave an advantage to people who are stronger, a clear advantage.
as long as you had the fitness to do the
Right,
thrusters in a decent set, right? Or stay
right.
on them. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It did favor it behooved you to be a smidge stronger. I'm sure there were people who have similar 1RMs, like we could find them on the leaderboard probably. People who have similar 1RMs and they have different times on this workout,
Hmm.
but that again references back their fitness,
Right.
right? Like there are guys who can thruster really big weight and are probably okay at gymnastics and probably didn't finish that workout.
Yeah.
Right.
But then there's also
So,
like strategy. Strategy also comes in play.
mhm,
Like those guys that can go unbroken on thrusters had a major advantage
mhm.
over
Yeah, you just
everybody
bought
who
time.
couldn't. Yeah.
You just bought time. Yeah, and it was a really good workout. I enjoyed it a lot, especially for the higher level people. I think the people who haven't been in the sport since 2015, 2016, like it was a good reminder of what this is at a high level. Oh, okay, you're real good at thrusters and bar muscle ups. That just means it's going to hurt a lot more.
Mhm.
So go
Yeah.
have fun, right? You couldn't, even if you were capable with those movements, you couldn't get a very solid time if you didn't. The way I was describing is the last 2 rounds of 7 and 7, you have to bite down on the mouthpiece
Hmm.
because it's going to get bad. And if you don't, you're not going to get that score that you could get, even if you're good at those movements.
And there was definitely like a big psychological factor to it in the last 5 rounds.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Like you had to want it. You
You do
can't just
those.
like
You do those first 7 thrusters and 7 bar muscle ups, and you're like, oh,
mhm.
we are we are in a different planet now.
It was like almost every single person I judged, like that face that happens after the first 7 thrusters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, um, all right, enough about the open. Everybody has talked about it ad nauseum at this point. We're a little bit behind on our podcast recording because we're not media people. We're
I
full time
also was
coaches,
I was very
and
sick last week.
Mahmoud was dying. he,
So you
he
can still hear it.
he's still sick, but yeah, he
Yeah.
was he was down for the count last week. So, all right, so we have quarterfinals coming up. Obviously, team quarterfinals are next week.
Yeah.
We're filming this on the 29th. So team quarterfinals are next week, and then we have about 10 days, something like that, after that until, well, a little more than 10 days, 14 days, 2 weeks until individual quarterfinals.
Yeah.
I think a good start to this conversation is the news that broke yesterday in the CrossFit community that quarterfinals will be 4 workouts, not necessarily 4 scores. Dave
Right.
apparently made a point to say that, but it will be 4 tests.
Yeah.
As I want you to speak to this from the affiliate side. What do you think of 4 versus 5 to 6 from the viewpoint of, okay, we have 40 plus athletes at CrossFit Greater Heights that we are going to have to move through the quarterfinals
I mean, logistically, it makes things a little easier. Like,
with the assumption that they won't want to redo them all.
well, it's it makes things a little easier to organize. Of like, hey,
Sure.
workout whatever is going to be on that day, workout whatever is going to be on that day. This is how we think you should go approach your workout. And these are the time slots that we're available to offer you.
Right.
You want to redo, that's on you, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
like those are the days that we can go around without affecting classes as much as we can. Because you got to understand that, like, even with 40 plus members being qualified for quarterfinals, that's 15% of the membership,
Correct. Yes. There's
right?
a we have a large amount of the membership that will be continuing on,
They don't, yeah, they didn't
with their
qualify,
fitness journey.
and they don't care enough. And like, because I don't exactly like, I can't anticipate what the tests are going to look like. I don't know if I can include them inside the gym's programming, or if it would be a good idea to do that.
So apparently CAP is going to be releasing like lesson plans and all
And
of
they
that
did that
stuff.
last year, but that still didn't mean that it was a great idea for most of those. I can do a version of it, but I can't. It's going to be hard to like, okay, we're going to do the quarterfinal workout. If you're doing quarterfinals, hop in and do it as well, right? Like,
Sure. Right.
right? I remember trying to do a version of the first workout last year, and one athlete did qualify but wasn't really signed up, and she's like, I'm just gonna do the handstand walk anyways. I think I replaced it with wall walks or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, like, she's walking between people as they are doing front squats. I'm like,
Right.
that's not
Right.
feasible to do for multiple people.
Right.
So I think that for, even though as an athlete, I for my athletic ability, more tests are better.
Well, hold on. Hold on. So
But
that
as
was
a,
from
right,
the
yeah,
affiliate side.
as an affiliate manager, I think it's better, easier to
You have a lot of
organize.
time. You have a lot of time.
Right,
So, okay, moving now, competitive sport perspective.
right,
4 tests, 5 scores. Now, if it's 5 scores, it's the same amount of scores as we've had the last 2 years.
true.
Okay. So I
I
don't go
I
ahead.
don't hate that, but I also, again, like, for me, I thought, okay, we're getting one extra day, then we get one extra test. And again, quarterfinals was kind of like, you got 5 days, 5 tests. There's not really enough time
Right.
to
To
redo
redo.
at least the majority of the workouts, like maybe one or two,
Depending on
right?
what's programmed and the volume, yeah.
Right. Now, I think it's, if it's for, again, depending on the workouts as well, like if each workout is 30 minutes, that's different. But like, if you probably can do all four in the first 2 days, take 2 days off and redo them, right?
Yeah.
So as a competitive athlete, I don't love that.
I
but
mean,
also some athletes. Again, I'm talking for specifically my athletic ability because I am a more well-rounded athlete, or
right.
I'm not good at one particular
The more
element.
tests that there
The more
are, the
tests, then
more you
the more
shine.
ground I'm gonna make up. Yeah.
You're a CrossFitter. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think it will be imperative that the tests are well written. With
Yeah.
we have a bigger field. We have many, many, many more outliers who have made it to the next stage now. Like I
Mhm.
know people who can clean and jerk 350 and cannot do a ring muscle up who have made quarterfinals.
Mhm.
Just as an example. And I also know people who cannot clean and jerk 250. I mean, and can do probably close to 20 unbroken ring muscle ups,
Right.
right? And there are undoubtedly people who can run a 5-minute mile, or a guy who can row a 6:32K and can't do either of those other things, but he's just really freaking fit.
Yeah.
So we have outliers in all three spectrums who have not made it to this stage. And I think it's imperative that with them having the field cut to 40, and I know CrossFit is going to say, well, we don't care about anybody but the fittest. Okay, cool. But I think it's imperative that the tests are well-rounded CrossFit tests balance are that balance things out. We get a good amount of skills. We get some good loading. We have a lot of fitness involved still, um, to get the right 40 and the 40 that deserve to be at the semifinals.
I agree. I mean,
I personally would not want to be the one who has to write these workouts because I would be fucking stressed.
I mentioned that earlier in one of our episodes earlier, but I think this year is they've put the pressure on the programming on themselves. This is the most crucial programming year that they've had
Yeah,
so far.
yeah, we've both said that. Ironically, like not talking to each other, but I I said that I commented this yesterday on Clydesdale's Thursday night show when they were talking. I think this is the most important set of tests CrossFit has ever written.
And
Out
I
like
think that,
ex- Including the Open, including the
right,
games, including semifinals. Like I think it's it's almost like in the political system, the Supreme Court makes a decision and it kind of sets a precedent.
yeah.
I That's how I almost feel about, and I could be wrong, but that's how I feel about this set of quarterfinals tests. Is this will set a precedent for what you need to be able to do to go to semifinals for the next X years, and it will also
Given that
set
they
the
keep the structure the same.
right, and it will also set the tone of what CrossFit is moving toward. I
True.
mean, if we get a really low skill open or a low skill quarterfinals with no really heavy loading and just a premium on fitness again, that will
It will
at,
alter the programming methodology of most people. What are they
at least
working on?
at least to a point. We
The
will put a
focus. Yeah.
premium on we will potentially put a premium on other things versus, and the same thing if they do it the inverse. If we
Right.
get if we get 3 workouts with just moderate to really heavy barbells, it's like, whoa, okay. So the open
Well,
you can kind of
well,
skirt
that
through,
that still keeps things balanced, though. It's like, okay, the premium is still on everything because you have to get through the open. You can't
but it
just
doesn't,
be
like I'm done beating around the bush about this. The open's not hard to get through anymore. The open doesn't matter for filtering people out into the semifinal stage. Like we need to stop. You cannot reference the quarterfinals tests off of what the open was anymore. Let too many people in.
I would say if they made that again and they cut it down to like 10%, then it would be
Sure, if
an
it was 10%, then I would go with more of an argument for that.
right.
But if you have a super engine heavy open and then you have a super weightlifting heavy, like really weightlifting heavy quarterfinals, and there's an overall lack of skills, that is inappropriate programming to get people to semifinals, in my opinion.
Right. No, I agree.
Because the open doesn't actually weed anybody out. It's not it weeds people out, but it doesn't weed people out who actually have a potential shot to go to semifinals. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah, it weeds
it
outliers
it
that
is a
should have made it to
community,
semifinals.
but it doesn't weed out outliers. Again, like I know multiple people who are incredibly biased on the weightlifting spectrum and do not have a high level of metabolic or cardiovascular fitness, and they easily made quarterfinals. So you cannot have a conversation about this saying the Open is truly a eliminating stage of the season
No.
for the competitive field. Like, and that's not to hurt anybody's feelings, but that's the fucking truth.
Hmm.
So you can't, when you make the quarterfinals tests, it would be, in my opinion, a mistake to reference the Open tests
Yeah.
in your testing body. Like, I think there still needs to be a engine bias test or an engine E test in
Right.
quarterfinals. I think it should be mixed modal and have skill, a barbell, a dumbbell, a 50, 70-pound dumbbell, some sort of monostructural movement, double unders, something cyclical.
Right.
And people walk away from the test being like, I mean, that was overall my breathing, right? If they can move the weight and things like that. But I think it is, you can't. I just think if you do that, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fair.
there's been a lot. I mean, obviously the social medias blew up yesterday with the announcement, and Clydesdale and them talked about it yesterday on the podcast. I know obviously a lot of athletes hear 4 tests, also no equipment list, and immediately are just very concerned about the programming. Um, the athletes who are kind of on the semifinal bubble, right? Or really want to put their best foot forward for quarterfinals. And here's where I think as a coach, my coach brain really takes over. Because I think my 2 thoughts on this, I talked with one of our other coaches, Hattie, about this yesterday. I talked to Courtney about this. I talked to Jamie about it a little bit last night, texting one of my master's athletes, 3rd place in the Open in her division, no big deal, and also like 100 and
Congratulations.
something worldwide, just a fucking monster. Um, my 2 thought processes on this are as follows: 1, I'm gonna trust Dave until I have a reason not to.
Okay.
Dave has been the 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 guy who has set the precedent for programming for so long. Obviously, Boz was involved last year, did it last year, the year before he's been involved. Boz has been involved in quarterfinals since 2021. I know him and Boz are kind of doing this jointly now. I'm going, as somebody who's been doing this for almost 10 years, I'm going to trust that Dave is going to test appropriately
Yeah.
until I have a reason not to,
Right.
right? Um, I do think if there's anybody who can write 4 workouts with 5 scores that take us, in North America West from the 25% to the 0.7%, because that's who goes to semifinals, it's Dave. I think he is good enough at programming and can do that in a well-rounded manner. So that's my first thought. I think people just need, like, everybody has their thoughts, everybody has their opinions, everybody has their concerns. Don't forget who's involved in this. You have 2 guys who have been doing this a really long time.
Yeah.
My second thought as a coach is it's time to turn the page in terms of how athletes look at this stuff. If you're a competitive athlete if you're an aspiring competitor who wants to put their best foot forward in quarters, or you are a competitor who is trying to go to semifinals or is going to go to the semifinals more than likely, it doesn't matter what's programmed. That is your job.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, as the time gets closer for the teams, for the individuals, it is the having conversations about why is it this, why is it that, this should have been this, blah 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 blah. I don't like this. No factor. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. For athletes trying to make it to semifinals, if they should not be having even stressors about that because no matter what is thrown at them, they should be able to excel at it.
I mean, I think it
as
depends on
a
your
collective
fitness.
results.
I think it depends on your fitness. If you're somebody who has made semifinals in the past and is confident you can get there again, you should be getting more confident as you make it once, you can probably make it. You know what I mean? I think those athletes have a little less stress, but even the athletes who are looking at, they were probably on the bubble last year or just outside the bubble and they're looking to make that punch in, it doesn't do you any good to complain or pontificate. And even as coaches at some point, I know that coaches in this day and age were very critical because the sport has started to evolve. We have thoughts. There's been so many changes, da 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 da, what we liked, what we didn't, this, that, the other. And I understand all those things. But as a coach going into this stage of the season, it's time to just put up or shut up.
Yeah,
It just
well,
it just doesn't matter.
if your job with those athletes and like quite frankly with every athlete that we have is to narrow the gaps that they have in
Correct.
order to not have that argument.
Yeah, in a perfect world.
Right. So like what we've been working on all year is narrowing those gaps.
Right.
And to the athletes that are at that level, that's what you need to be focusing on instead of asking or worrying about what if the programming is skewed this way or that way,
Right.
right? So like
Everybody has weaknesses.
right, and I'm not saying be Superman, but I'm saying
Sure.
make your weaknesses less vulnerable, make your weaknesses less exposing.
Yeah, so that's a good segue because I don't really want to just continue to feed into the drama pool. I wanted to leave that kind of with the note of if you're a competitive athlete or you're trying, even if you're not going to go to semifinals and you're just trying to put your best foot forward, don't waste your time complaining anymore. Like you're going to be given a set of tasks.
Right.
Go execute the tasks to the best of your ability. And then when it's all said and done, okay, you can look back and talk about it. And,
And
it's
that
not that you
and
can't
I
have
think it
emotion. It's just the emotion leading into it and when they get announced and during it is not going to serve you.
right. And like think about it like a whatever, a school test, right?
Exactly.
Let's say like it's a math test and it was heavier on geometry than algebra, and you're better at algebra
I
than
love how you say algebra.
sorry, algebra compared to geometry. You can't blame the test. It's still in the book.
Right.
It's still something you need to be good at, and the fact that
Yeah.
you didn't study geometry doesn't make the test wrong.
Yeah, there's a big difference. If quarterfinals event one comes out and it's max time and an iron cross, then okay, we can
Right.
we
Right.
can talk about it. But
Sure.
I don't think it's going to be anything like that. So
And I think that people who are have been pouring in their efforts, and let's say they're not going to make it semifinals. Whatever tests come your way, and yeah, sure, you can be upset that you didn't make it or whatever, but the outcome should be okay. What do I need to work on?
right.
Right? That's your outcome.
All right, so let's kind of segue over. I know we wanted to keep this relatively brief for one of our podcasts. You mentioned preparing as best you can for your weaknesses and things like that. So obviously the open's been over for a little over a week and change or 2 weeks now. I don't even
Almost two,
know.
yeah,
Almost two
two.
weeks. We have about 2 weeks. What have you been having your athletes do to prepare for quarterfinals, specifically or generally in terms of things they might need to work on to be prepared for quarterfinals under the assumption that it will be at least reminiscent to quarterfinals we've seen in the past?
So I've been definitely pushing the skills a little bit more. We've been exposing people again, and it depends on what athlete I'm talking about here. But like
Sure.
for athletes who have made it quarterfinals before and are expecting to do well, the even the CrossFit metcons now are more. All right, let's see some complicated gymnastics. Let's see some wall facing gymnastics in the workouts. Let's see some high volume ring muscle ups in the workouts. Let's see some handstand walks with unbroken distances in the workout and so on.
Hmm.
And maybe even some like unprecedented movements like, okay, we'll put pirouettes in the Metcon, we'll put heavy deadlifts in the Metcon, we'll put some high volume rope climbs in. So stuff that are inspired by previous workouts from quarterfinals, even semifinals, kind of um, um, modality or like, okay, or complexity, not modality, complexity.
Hmm.
Um, for athletes that are just making it to quarterfinals, you'll see a lot more like just solidifying those skills. So like, okay, we'll do high volume ring muscle ups in what is less intense and more like, let's make sure that your sets look the same across the EMOM,
Yeah,
right? Or,
consistency and
right.
kind of confidence building sets.
Right, but
Right.
definitely like you'll see that we've been in general we've had a global vision for Ascend to peak conditioning wise, so we've had like closer to a running cycle that is ending or a rowing cycle that is ending, and that has been across most of the athletes as well. And I feel like we've been seeing a lot of progress with everybody that's been on those two cycles. Strength did take a little dip after the Open, just like give them a week to kind of relax a little bit. But I think starting this week, actually, we started ramping it up with
Hmm.
most athletes. If somebody has a particular weakness in one of the lifts or so, we started doing more accessory lifts for that, just to again push that push the progress as much as we can until we get to quarterfinals.
Yeah, we haven't really, obviously, with the last couple episodes and even before the Open, we haven't really discussed, programming structures and thoughts and things we're doing in Ascend. But um, most of our athletes are wrapping up, moving into the last week prior to quarterfinals or the week before that. Um, they're kind of monostructural peaking in terms of conditioning. They're testing out things. They should be feeling very sharp on those things. And there's a reason we did certain time domain style tests, certain movements to have their fitness peaked ideally for quarterfinals. It's not necessarily always about um, the specific modality. A lot of times it is, but it's not always. So I think that's a good point for you to bring up. I definitely want to, in maybe the next couple podcasts, have some more conversations and talk about how we prepare athletes for quarterfinals and the season structure. I know we've talked about, the cycles in the past and things like that, but
Right.
I think I think it's time for us to go into the weeds a little bit and discuss those things in the future, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings in terms of why we do certain things, when we do certain things, and how we do certain things. And it's not necessarily a secret proprietary blend of,
Yeah.
it's not something that I don't feel comfortable talking about to the ether to help people. I just think we hadn't really dove into that. So that's something I want to dive into in the future, but not to go out into the weeds there now.
And
I do
something that
think.
was also highly important is we talk to each athlete individually and
Mhm.
see how they felt, what they're how they're feeling about quarterfinals, what can we do to help each athlete, even when it comes to like, what do you want to see in the next few weeks that you haven't seen, right? Or what do you feel like we
Yeah.
haven't been working on? Like giving us the feedback right now and making sure that they are psychologically ready. I'm gonna be honest, like I had an athlete that I had to like, you know what, let's chill for a little bit. Like let's
Mhm.
I feel like you're approaching that burnout. We're gonna listen to our bodies for the next 10 days
Yep.
and we're just gonna try and do what feels right. And like he has been catching up and like I'm like, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm able to recover better. Like
Right.
and that's what he needed, right? Like I
Yep.
can't, it's not a forced template of like, okay, quarterfinals, let's put the curtain down and like we're gonna go and like No, what does each athlete need and how did they react to the Open and what's their energy going into quarterfinals?
Yeah, I think you highlight something there that's a really important balance. And it's probably one of the landmark ways we view one-on-one programming. So the majority of the year, we're like, okay, we're trying to take person A's physiology and increase their capacity,
Right.
right? And that's how we look at it. Like, you're a human organism. What do you suck at, and what do we need to make you better at?
Hmm.
And then as we approach the season, whether and the specific parts of the season, if you're peaking for quarterfinals or if you're peaking for semifinals, the mindset shifts a little bit to what are you going to be expected to be able to do?
Hmm.
And I have to start to prepare you for this as best as I can, to, you know, from where your physiology is currently at.
Right.
But that's always still a push and pull relationship. And the athlete is always first,
Right.
right? So
Uh,
it's a give and take, and it's a hard balance, because the example I like to make is a semifinal specific example. But if somebody struggles with seated legless rope climbs, and we are 4 weeks out from semifinals, yes, weighted pull-ups, chin-ups, hand over head sled pull, those are all great things to make somebody better at seated legless. But once we're a month out, you just need to do seated legless, because that's what you're going to be asked to do, right? But that's always referenced on the backdrop of how's the athlete feeling with training volume? How are their joints feeling? How are they feeling with all of those things that you just described? But I think that's an important thing to highlight in how we prepare our athletes for quarterfinals, semifinals, CrossFit games, any competition that they're peaking for, is we look at what are you going to be asked to do, and we try to prepare you for that as best as possible. And that's not always the focus shifts. Like, that's not how we do things all year round, because that's a
Yeah.
recipe for injury and burnout.
Right.
But at a certain point, because this is a sport, when we're talking about it this way, you have to be sport specific,
Hmm.
and you sometimes you just got to climb the fucking rope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that that is something that we do a little bit differently from um, other programs. And I think it's an important thing that should be done. Like, everything should always be referenced against the individual,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't, like, if somebody feels like shit after the open or after, a high volume, intense week of training, and they're not going to be able to put in the intensity to the training we have planned. I mean, this is a conversation I have had a lot of times, but at this point in my career, I'm way more likely to just be like, go home. Go
Writing
home.
the intensity for an athlete who is incapable of applying the intensity doesn't mean that you're doing your job.
Right. And it's just like, sure, at a certain point, it's like, all right, well, let's, potentially just lower the intensity, maybe get in some of the volume or get in some skill work. But I have several athletes that I coach, and their their physiology just is a certain way where they can put out a lot of output for a couple days, and then it's like,
Shut
hey,
down city.
I can't, like, I don't want to get out of bed. And it's like,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Like, and over time working with those athletes, I've gotten better at predicting that and adjusting that and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're looking for stimulus and recovery. So
Right.
especially moving into quarterfinals, to try to wrap this up and make it quarterfinal specific, moving into quarterfinals, if you're not getting a stimulus, just go recover.
Yeah.
Like,
Like
go
this
home
for
and
for
eat and
s-
go to bed.
for athletes who made it to quarterfinal, this has been their peak.
Right.
This is what they're training for. So
Right.
yes,
You're
congratulations on doing well in the open, but I need you still to be able to function to get better in that month between the open and quarterfinals. And
right. And I mean, go ahead.
if you're not able to, then I'm not gonna ask you to bang your head against the wall,
Right.
right?
And I mean, where we're sitting at right now, we're 2 weeks out basically.
Right.
So it's, or, I mean, 2 weeks and change. Like, we can all be honest, and all the other coaches out there should be honest. You're really not getting a lot fitter
No,
from
absolutely.
now till quarters.
You're
You're
priming.
you're polishing. Exactly. You're
Right.
polishing and priming movements and getting accustomed to the feel and the stimulus of what we think quarterfinals is going to be like. So if you can't get the intensity, get that feel, sharpen the sword, I'd rather you just go home and recover half the time.
And that conversation is also like probably more valid last week,
Definitely, definitely. Yeah,
right?
I mean, there
Like
is
this, I've given people half the week off last week.
yeah, there is a give and take in terms
Right.
of, if you're going to overreach, you have to overreach.
Right.
It's not going to be fun,
Right.
right? But there is a relationship, especially depending on the level of the athlete, the type of athlete, their outside life circumstances, in terms of recovery, training, job stressors, life stressors, all those things, where it's like sometimes it is okay. I know this is crazy for most of us CrossFitters to hear, and I'm one of the
One of them.
worst.
Yep.
I'm one of the worst, especially when I was training. Like, I'm just gonna go home,
Yeah.
or I'm just gonna ride the bike for 20 minutes and stretch and work on my
Yeah.
mobility or my positions, or things like that. Do a little prehab, rehab. Like, when you're playing the game of peaking,
Hmm.
the the exceptions to the rule rear their head a lot more frequently.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this bad boy up. I know you have stuff to do today. Um, I don't even have any desire to do quarterfinal predictions or any of that crap.
I have
Um,
two questions to kind of,
Wrap us up.
yeah.
All right.
Um, Question one is I want to ask you if I am an athlete that was on 85th percentile or 90th percentile, I've been making it to quarterfinals every year.
Okay.
I don't see the need to do quarterfinals. What's your advice to that? Or what was a coach, how would you go about that?
So you made it to quarterfinals like roughly every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, I've made it the past 4 year or 3 years, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna go anywhere even if I do quarterfinals. What's the point?
I would say my biggest justification for that athlete, especially if they're paying a one-on-one coach and they're wanting to pursue this competitively, is I would like to see where you fall referenced against your field with more tests.
Right.
And
So,
in theory, these tests will be higher skill, heavier loading, more variance, things like that. So
right,
that would be, as a coach, my first reason. Be like, look,
right,
if you have the goal of going to semifinals at some point, even though that's a 2, 3, 4, 5 year plan,
right,
this is a good check-in. That is a different set of check-ins from what we got in the open, especially this year.
right.
So that would be probably my biggest justification. And the other thing is, it is online qualifier style experience. And a lot
Hmm.
of those athletes do like to do TFX, Wadapalooza. They might want to do Iron Games, Crash Crucible, whatever. So you get a little bit more practice at like warm up, cool down, tape line, judge, blah, 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 that stuff.
Fair enough. And then my second question is for the athlete that did not make quarterfinals, their season has pretty much ended, or their official season.
Yes.
What would you be doing now for an athlete of yours that did not make quarterfinals,
We're two
given
weeks
that they're
out.
trying to be competitive and so on, or that quarterfinals is their goal?
I would be having them start a progression on their biggest limiter from the open, which, if I had to guess, would, just based on the test that we had, would be overall fitness,
Hmm.
cardiovascular. So they would be starting a typical off-season protocol from what I like to do, and that would include a lot of long time duration single modality cardiovascular work and strength work. And I would be also taking a step back and looking at uh, positions and mobility and things like that while trying to build very basic strength in a well-rounded capacity. You're going to be rowing a lot, running a lot, doing long cardio at various intensities, and lifting a lot of weights, squatting, um, snatching, but also in the off season in particular, I'm a really big fan of like bench press, strict pull up, weighted strict pull up, um, rows, things like that. Like, hey, let's just go make you a better organism.
Over. Hmm.
And then I would be diving a lot into, do you have any kind of movement and mobility restrictions? Do you have any really bad technique habits, technique positions, things like that?
So
Because
you would, for an athlete who is aspiring to make quarterfinals and was not able to qualify this year, you would be recommending that they approach or start their off season towards this point.
yes, and my probably biggest reason for that is you have you have 365 days till next year's hockey tryouts. Like they have the biggest off season of any other athlete in the space.
Right,
Literally almost a full 12 months. So I mean I would have kicked them out of the gym until probably this week or next week.
right.
Um
As
and
it as
I
it gave them rest.
and training volume would be relatively low, but the stimuluses would just be dispersed out. Like
Gotcha.
I don't want anybody who's just trying to qualify for quarterfinals in the gym twice a day.
Yeah.
No freaking reason. Like you need to, hey, one day we're gonna really work on being aerobic. The next day we're gonna work on being strong, and then we're gonna do a little CrossFit, and then we're just gonna rinse and repeat that.
Mhm.
So,
Um. Okay.
all
Any
right.
questions that you have to end this beautiful episode?
I don't think so. I'm excited for quarterfinals. I'm excited to see what comes out. I am very curious, obviously. I'm excited for our athletes to take on quarterfinals. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be busy bees. Um, I'm excited for my teams going next week. Got a team out in the East, got a lady on a team out in the East, and then uh, have some people doing team out here in the West as well. So I'll be excited for that and looking forward to seeing them all punch their ticket for semifinals, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a it's an exciting time of the year. It's a busy time of the year for us, but I think I'm excited to see what quarterfinals in, and I hope the people who listen to this get something out of it for not only their physical preparation for quarterfinals, but their mental preparation for quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So,
And I would add in that if you are interested or intrigued to whether prime for quarterfinals or whether start your journey with just getting to quarterfinals next year, we have released our blogs with SugarWOD. So
yes,
now we are on SugarWOD. We are available on the marketplace. We
yep,
are offering a month free
month free
trial
trial.
if you sign up this coming week. So from now, we're available already to sign up until the April the 7th, I believe.
I think so.
Um, Sign up now. You have 1 month to try it for free. If you don't like it, you don't have to continue with it.
Yep,
But workouts are we
there's
have
three
multiple.
programs on there:
Right, there you go.
compete, train, and a weightlifting specific program. So, if you are somebody who needs to get stronger and fitter, that weightlifting program would be a pretty good place to start
Yeah.
because there is some conditioning in there, some some skill, but it is a weightlifting focused program. So,
Also, if you're interested in buying some apparel, we have released the
mm,
varsity apparel.
yep,
It's going on for another week or so. I think around the same April 7th, I think is when it's
9 more days.
uh,
April 7th is the last
midnight.
day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the link is in our bio on Instagram. You should be able to find it there. We can put it down there as well
Yeah, I'll
in
put it in
the
the show notes.
description. Yeah. And then last but not least, be very stay tuned very tuned to our next camp, our
Oh
off-season
yes,
camp.
off-season camp.
Um, do you want to go into further details or keep it still?
We'll keep it under wraps for another week. We'll drop some more information on it next week when we do our next podcast.
Sounds awesome. But yeah, it
So
is coming soon, so stay tuned. Tell your friends. We're
it'll be fun.
gonna be excited to see you. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, best of luck in quarterfinals, everybody, and we will see y'all next time.
Yes. Have a great rest of your day.